Today we're visiting with Julie Durst, and Julie's been a member at Hope Church since March the 7th, 1982.
82.
And I have a hunch you may have gone there before that, either to check it out or to do it. Tell us how you first heard about Hope Church.
I had been going to Littleton Methodist Church because I taught in Littleton and I lived out in that, I don't know, half a mile or so from the Littleton Church. I was there when Fred Venable was there as their lead minister, and then Jim Barnes came. Anyway, and then I moved over here, and so that was a long haul, to go that far. And so I started looking for churches here, and Hope was there. They were still meeting in Fellowship Hall when I started going. And I suppose I signed the attendance pad, and then I gave my address, and within a week or less, Victor Schultz was on my doorstep.
Victor Schultz was the
Victor
visitation
Schultz,
slash
yep,
associate
yep.
pastor, that's right.
And so he convinced me that that's where I should be.
But you didn't know anybody that attended church there?
I don't think so. I don't think I did. And I do remember the Sunday that I joined, I was the only one. And Al Brown was minister then,
Yes.
and Al said to Victor, "Oh, not another one from Iowa." I said, oh well.
Oh, yeah.
But, so then I soon started singing in the choir, because I've always done that wherever I've been, and, so.
And you grew up as a Methodist?
Yes, I did, always. I think my mother was maybe a Presbyterian way back when, but we grew up Methodist. My dad, late in life, late, not anymore, right, as you get to this age in life. My mother got sick with leukemia and died when she was 48.
Oh, no.
And about that time, my dad had gotten kind of interested in the church and whatever, and he wound up kind of like Dave Christensen has been as like a local licensed preacher.
Oh, okay.
And started doing that at the age of 50 or so, and did that then until he retired. So I didn't grow. I was a preacher's kid, but I didn't grow up one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you mentioned Al Brown and Victor Schultz. Tell us what you remember about Victor Schultz.
I don't really remember too much, other than him coming to visit and what a nice man he was, and
He was famous for visiting everybody.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, but made me feel very welcome, and that's probably where I should be.
Yeah. And you remember Al Brown?
Oh yeah.
Tell us about Al Brown.
Well, after watching some of the other videos, I remembered him at the end of the service. He was always standing outside waiting to greet everybody, and somebody mentioned that so he could smoke his pipe or do something, I don't know. But I also remember on Bronco Sundays, he wanted everybody to be up and out of there so he could be watching the Bronco game.
That's right. And he did have a fondness for a pipe, that's true. He smoked a pipe.
Yeah. But, I mean, having been in education and gone from principal to principal to principal, going from minister to minister to minister, each one has their strong points and their weak points, and you just kind of go with the flow. And we're not happy at this point to be facing what we're facing with Clear leaving. But
yes. Well, those of us that grew up in the Methodist Church kind of get
Used
used
to
to that.
Absolutely.
Like every few years you have a new minister, and sometimes you love them, and sometimes you go, oh, well, he'll be gone after a while, or she'll be gone after a while, and then you find another one that you love.
And there are people who, when we have a change in ministers, think they have to change and look for something else, and Hope Church has been my support group, and that's where our friends have been for 30 years, and there's no way that I could think about going anywhere else.
A lot of us feel strongly about that
Yeah.
community of faith that we call Hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, when you first came there in the 80s, the only building was what we now call the Schultz Fellowship Hall.
Right.
Tell us what it was like to worship in that building.
Well, it was all chairs. We didn't have pews. They were just set up with chairs in there, and the as you go in now, the far corner up to the right had risers,
Yes.
and that's where the choir sat.
Yeah.
I remember one of the Sundays that Red Miller was, and Nancy Miller were members there at the time, and it was when the Broncos were doing well.
Isn't he the Broncos
Yeah.
coach?
Yeah, so, and there was a big standing ovation for him. You know, so, and then of course we had the building campaign and all of that
Yes.
to get the sanctuary going.
All of that started with Al Brown and
Right.
trying to raise money to make the plans for
And
the
I
sanctuary.
wasn't as involved then, you know, I sang in the choir and that's about all I did. You know, didn't serve on any committees or anything of that stuff until later.
You sang in the choir when Barb Lair was
Yes, Barb was the director, yeah.
and
Again, we've had a lot of different choir directors
Yes.
over the years.
yeah. Well, a lot of people have talked about the quality of the leadership and the musicians and the people that have gone through there, and I've always
Absolutely.
been impressed about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I compliment you for being a part of that choir for so long because it means so much to the congregants. It just adds to the worship, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does. Music makes it more for me than most anything
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
I mean, you know, some of the messages have been really good, and the presenters, the ministers have been really good at doing that. You know, some of them are better administrators, and some of them are better preachers, and you know, it just kind of. But music is the one constant
Yes.
as far as I'm concerned.
And that's been a lifelong interest of yours?
Yeah, it has. I sang in small groups and choir when I was in high school, and was in a group that sang and put on performances. We did Brigadoon and Once Upon a Mattress, that kind of thing when I was in college.
Yes.
I never was a soloist. I was always in the choir, so to speak. There's a place for everybody in the choir.
Well, with the music department at Hope, or the people who have come through there, do you have special memories of some people that you've sung with?
Merlin Bender was really special. I remember him singing I'll never forget him singing one of the cantatas, just brought me to tears, one of the Easter cantatas. It's just, I don't know, I look at it now and there's still some people that have been there a long time, and we're getting yet some new ones, and trying to lower the average age of the choir,
Yes.
so it's not all old people. Mary Witt and Sally Robertson and Ruth Most, when they did their Perfect Blend group, and you know, all of them were there a long time. Mary's still there, of course. Organists, you know, we went, again, that's another group that we've been through a lot of. I don't think we'll ever do any better than having Cheryl that we have right now.
She is amazing.
I remember when going through one of the new pastors, I don't remember which one it was, Don Bird maybe, and one of the little get-together sessions that we had to get acquainted. And I said, there are two people you can't mess with at Hope. And one of them is Cheryl. And the other one was Kate Stapleton.
Yes.
I said, we gotta hang on to them. I don't care what happens to anybody else. We
They're
gotta
carrying more than
hang
their
on to
share.
them.
We need to keep
Yeah.
them. Absolutely.
So,
After Al Brown was the pastor, Dr. Richard Vickery came to be the senior pastor. You remember Dr. Vickery?
oh, of course, he married us.
Did he?
Yeah, he and my dad kind of did our ceremony together.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And you're talking about married Don,
Uh-huh.
Don Durst.
In 1989. And I didn't know Dick very well. Don had gotten acquainted with him maybe through the men's group or something. That old men's breakfast group that Don was real active in. I just remember Don saying that Dick was pretty private and not very emotionally demonstrative or whatever. I remember Don saying, I think I got him to give hugs. And I know that there were some people that weren't real crazy about Dick when he was there, and I remember when he left, it was not a good situation. But, you know, he came to our house and did our premarital counseling, and and we really liked him, so, you know.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a little more formal, I think.
Yes,
Not
yes.
as gregarious, certainly
I
as
saw
Al Brown.
him probably, I bet it's been 5 or 6 years ago now, because he's been serving the church up in Central City, part-time, since he retired. And I went up with a friend to the Central City Opera in the summertime, and she said, we went up and we spent the night, and this friend of mine said, I think we should go to church. There's that Methodist church right across the street. And I said, sure.
That's right.
So we did, and there was Dick. And and his whole service was exactly like it was when he was at Hope.
He's a creature of habit.
Very much so, very
Well,
much
how
so.
did it go that your father and he cooperated in the
Well,
marriage?
because that's when my dad was serving churches in Iowa, and he had done my sister's wedding, which was back in 68, yeah, 20 years before mine. And we simply, Don and I said it'd be neat to have him be part of it. And I didn't know if we could, if they would allow that, because Dad was in Iowa and wasn't a fully ordained minister. He'd gone to seminary part-time, whatever, and had, became whatever they called him. But anyway, we talked to Dick, and Dick said he didn't have any problem with that. So, Dick did the majority of it, but Dad was allowed to do some of it. So it was good. So
That's very meaningful.
All of our pictures have both of them.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, after Dr. Vickery, Sam Day came as the
Yeah.
minister, and the church grew rapidly. You remember Sam Day?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We loved Sam. One of the things, I remember funny things, I suppose. I remember Sam preaching one time, and of course his sermons always had the 3 parts. And so you had to listen to
Yes.
find out what the 3 parts were going to talk about. But I'll never forget him making the comment about having somebody providing cookies, and he thought they were chocolate chip, and it turns out they were raisins, and he thought that was terrible.
Oh,
He no, I want chocolate chip cookies, so I don't want raisins in my cookies. But no, I really liked Sam, and Sam was one of those, probably more so than any of the others we've had, who could do both ends of the spectrum. He was a good administrator. He was a great preacher. Always went home with something. He always was going to give us the good news. That was always part of Sam. And we saw them a time or two after they left here. We had friends, the Baileys, who used to be at Hope,
Yes.
who have a home up in Estes Park, and we would see them occasionally when we went to Estes Park, because they had a summer place in Estes. So, yeah, we liked Sam.
well, the church grew rapidly at that time, and we moved into what is now the main sanctuary.
Right.
You remember those days, and the choir moving into
Oh, sure.
the new
Yeah.
choir lot?
Oh, and the sound, whether the sound thing they built behind the choir was extending the sound out, if it was built the way it was supposed to have been built, and all of that, and, yeah.
It was a dramatic improvement from essentially a big hall
Oh,
where we
absolutely.
were meeting before.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was very
yeah,
nice.
Yeah, and which part of the choir was gonna sit in which section, do we want the sopranos over here? No, we don't hear them as well, we want them over here. Yeah.
Well, after Sam Day left, we had a co-pastorate with John Lee and Margaret Hankins. You remember both of them?
Oh, absolutely. John was a great friend of Don's. He had served at a little Mountain View Community Church in Aurora at some point. And before Don and I were together, he was living in Aurora, and he went to that church, and Don had moved out here from Ohio after a nasty divorce. And John really helped him walk through that walk, to get through that and move on. So Don was ecstatic when John came to Hope. And we did a lot of things with him, even socially, at that time. And Margaret, I just grew to love. I had one of Margaret's students, one of her kids at Arapahoe.
Who did you?
And she always sang the praises of business department at Arapahoe got that kid through. So, yeah,
So
so,
Margaret was one of the first female
right.
pastors in the conference,
Right.
and certainly at Hope she was a pioneer.
Right.
Did you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, I thought it was great, you know. I'm sure that there were any number of people who said, oh, I don't think I can handle a woman minister, but it never, and I think it probably helped that she and John were so that, you know, I think some people probably said, oh, she's preaching this Sunday, we'll wait and go when John's preaching, or, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, don't kill the messenger, you know.
Well, and in many
Because
ways,
her messages were wonderful.
yes.
You know. And then I have been involved in that Sunday school class that she taught for a long time, and the contemporary spirituality class that Jim now leads.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, we were pretty good friends.
That's been a close group over the years also.
It has.
And then Margaret was co-pastor also with Steve.
Steve Miller.
Steve Miller came, and they served until essentially she retired, or
Right.
got ready to retire.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Steve thought he wanted to do it on his own and decided after a year or two that maybe that wasn't the thing to do.
Yeah.
I think Steve was one who didn't like the administrative end of it at all.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah,
I agree.
struggled with that.
Yeah. And after that, we had Steve Warren, who followed Steve Miller. You may remember Steve Warren?
Oh, yeah.
You have memories of him?
Not particularly favorable, but
No?
I don't know. He was kind of one who, he wanted to be in charge, and it was my way or the highway, kind of. I remember we had some discussions, and I was serving as secretary of the ad council at that point, and was on finance, and, you know, we had some issues.
Yes. Yes.
But,
Well, part of that interim period after that, Dale Beck came.
oh, I love Dale. That was, I think Dale was there maybe right after Don died. And it was, I just kept thinking, oh, I wish he'd been here. Yeah, because, yeah, Steve Warren left shortly after Don passed,
Yeah.
which will be 10 years this fall.
Well, I know that was a difficult time in your life, Julie. Can you tell us what role the church played?
Oh, I couldn't have done it without the church. Absolutely the most caring, supportive people. Being the caregiver is a tough role. Fortunately, we didn't have any lengthy time when Don was really incapacitated. It was really just the last year, maybe, out of 3 years after he was diagnosed with the cancer. But the guys from the men's Bible study group would come and stay with him so I could get out. Don and Sally Matthews came and stayed with him so I could go to choir and go to church when he was laid up and not able to get out or do anything. So, you know, I wouldn't have been able to get through it without the support. I often wonder how people get through those times if they don't have faith in the church family.
That's true.
It was our support.
We had mentioned earlier Don Bird, and he followed Steve Warren as the senior pastor there. Remember Don Bird?
Oh, of course, yeah. He, you know, he brought some youth to us, I think, because he was considerably younger than some of the others that we'd had, or they'd grown up, you know, whatever. Just
And now Claire McNulty Drews is the pastor.
I love Claire. Claire just is a breath of fresh air. And her messages are always just right there and give us something to think about. She makes me think about scripture in different ways that I hadn't ever had thought about in that particular scripture and
Yes.
how it fits in today's world and today's lives. We're going to miss her tremendously.
I agree. I just love her and her whole approach.
Yeah.
We've also had some associate pastors in and out of there. There were ladies. You remember Marilyn Lesser?
Yes, yeah, Don and I were part of the adult ministry education team when she and Al were leading that. I liked Marilyn. I thought.
And
they
did
were
you have a relationship where you remember Marla Coward?
Yes. And Marla's another one we had a connection through Arapahoe High School where I taught,
We
because
did.
that's where her kids went. So I knew one of her daughters from that. I liked Marla. We took some classes from her, and I liked her theology. Yeah.
I learned a lot from her. I agree. And more recently, Stephanie Price
Oh,
was associate.
Stephanie, for a young woman, has so much knowledge, and I mean, you just are amazed when Stephanie talks and preaches or writes, whatever. Where does all that come from, this young girl?
Yes.
I just remember one time in one of her sermons when she talked about being on a plane. Do you remember that story?
Yes. And she
And,
told him
and
she
she
was a
working,
pastor.
and somebody asked her what she was doing. Was she studying for a college class? Or no, she told them what she did. And they listen to you? They do.
Yes.
Yep. So, yeah. And I think I hope she's doing well with this whole land project and getting that going and all of that.
I think so. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but
Right.
it's a very different kind of mission.
Yeah, I just
or
got their
plan.
newsletter, and they're gonna start planting and doing all that kind of stuff this spring, so,
Yeah, I think so too.
yeah.
Well, you mentioned being involved in the choir, but for years you were also the secretary for the church council.
I was secretary for the building committee when we did the last one, when Chris Brooks was chair of the building committee. And I don't know if it was that one, it was maybe this, when we did the sanctuary. Was that when Marilyn and Pete Barber were involved?
Yes.
In helping us raise money? And the one thing I remember was that after all of their interviews with members of the congregation, they told us how much they thought we could probably raise, and as I recall, we raised more.
Yes.
Than,
And I was astounded at the number they mentioned.
yeah, right. Yeah, but Marilyn became a real good friend of mine. Yeah. So, yeah, there were lots of meetings and all of that.
We've been on education, lay leadership.
No, not lay leadership. Don was on lay leadership, and I was on secretary to the Ed Council for a number of times. Finance, I'm chair of the music committee now,
Yeah.
and which is part. No, it's not. I'm also on the worship committee. I line up the people to serve communion, to help serve communion. I've been doing that for 3 years now. And that's probably.
Well,
I have never been real active in UMW, but I kind of co-chaired the sock project when we were collecting toiletries and putting them in the socks and giving them out to the homeless, and I did that for 2 or 3 years, sorting toiletries.
And when I
And
got
stuffing
here
400
today,
pairs of socks.
you were telling me about keeping track of all the equipment that's in the
And
loan.
now I work on the loan closet.
And tell us about that project.
Oh, it's an amazing project. And Donna Ralston decided, I guess, back in 2016, that people were leaving pieces of medical equipment, like in the coat area off the front entrance, wheelchairs or walkers or crutches or whatever, and I don't know, she talked to the ministers at the time or whatever, but we got to do something about this. And so they wound up with a little storage shed outside the church where they started putting this equipment and let people know that if they needed to borrow a wheelchair or whatever, we'd had some of that stuff. Well, and then they went to a bigger place, and now they're in 3 different places. There's 2 different warehouse places. One of them houses everything but the hospital beds and the bariatric equipment. They got a semi-trailer bed
Wow.
That somebody, one of the volunteers knew this company was going out of business that had these big, huge trucks, and said, what are you gonna do with those? Well, we don't know, we give them away, whatever, we sell them to other companies. So could we have one of them? And so they got, and then they had to find a place to put it, because not every place will let you set a semi-trailer bed. And they got Tagawa Gardens, allowed them to do it, just free gratis. So it sits out there, and that's where the hospital beds have been, and the bariatric equipment, because they take up so much room.
Yeah.
That, because the other warehouse is full of walkers and wheelchairs and crutches and canes and toilet risers and you name it. And they've also now just taken a spot at a public storage place that's closer to where the warehouse is. And, it's an amazing concept. They've gotten some good publicity. Channel 7 did a piece on them not too long ago. Donna's been great. She's gone to the Rotary clubs all around and getting some financial aid from them, because you have to pay rent for the warehouse.
Right, sure.
But all the equipment, with rare exception, I think we had to buy some knee scooters last year because we didn't have enough of them. It's become a big thing, and of course now through the winter, I'm sure it's even bigger with skiing and whatever.
I would think so.
But all the equipment's donated, and when they get it, they make sure it's in good working order. They have people that make sure it's clean. They put it on the website for the loan closet so people know about it. They've done a great job of advertising with local hospitals and senior centers and all kinds of places. When I had physical therapy, I gave one of the cards to my physical therapist, and she's given it out to people there that need those kinds of equipment. And so you can check it out for 3 months and then turn it back in, or you can get an extension up to 3 months. Anything over that, they say, well, if it's going to be permanent, you really ought to buy it.
Yes.
And they have some pricing put on it. My brother has just gone from a rehab facility to, they've had to move to a one-level apartment or townhouse, and they bought the hospital bed that they had checked out from there for him to have at home. And the pricing on it was about half of what you pay to go buy a brand new hospital bed. Any number of people that just said, we couldn't have gotten through it. And then all they ask for people to do is make a donation. And sometimes they pay $5 and sometimes they pay $200.
Yes.
It sort of depends on what they can do. But occasionally items get lost, and occasionally, they check out things for very elderly people, and they may die, and the family doesn't even know where that stuff came from, and they just give it away. And so you call 2 months later and say, where's this wheelchair? Oh, we didn't know where it belonged, and so we don't have it anymore. But for the most part, it's been a wonderful program.
I agree. It's very effective for people, and at a time when they need some assistance.
Absolutely. Yeah, my brother had fallen and was in the hospital, and then he went home over Christmas, and my nephew I told him about it, they went to the loan closet and they checked out 8 different items, like a thing to help put on your socks, because he'd fallen and broken his femur, and so he couldn't bend over and do that. So, it's an amazing program. So in last January, February, Donna said, you said you'd help with this at some point. And I said, I did, what do you need? Well, whoever had been keeping track of doing the computerized inventory part, so the gals that are there, mostly women, to check out the equipment, have forms that they fill out, the people fill out, and then every item has a number, and they take pictures of that and send it to me. So then I enter it on the computer, on the spreadsheet, and they let me know when something's missing, or, and then it comes out. So, anyway, it's a good program.
Well, Julie, you've been involved in Hope Church in many different ministries. In fact, you and Don were honored as recipients of the Sam Day Award
Well, it
in
was really
2008.
Don, I think.
I don't, you're being modest, but the reputation around the church was if you needed something done, you called Julie and Don, and they'd either do it or take care of it and make sure that it got done.
Well, and I got a lot of that from him. Don was a great person to give and provide service. He helped, I don't know how many people at the church move when they needed help with moving. He also got the Quiet Disciple Award from the conference one year. So, kind of a little behind the scenes, another lifelong Methodist.
Well, we all serve in some way, even if we just show up and help sing. You've gone far beyond what most people do for serving that community.
Well, thank you. It's a big part of my life.
You've now been there nearly 38 years. Can you tell us what that 38 years has meant to you?
Oh, it's been my family away from my family. My brother is here. We're not particularly close, but I'm very close to my sister, but she lives in Ohio, and so I see her, a lot, but she's not here. And never having had children, it's just been my support group.
What do you like best about Hope Church?
Well, the sense of mission, I think, and the sense of caring for other people, whether it's within the church or outside the church. We never struggle with coming up with funding when we need it for somebody, again, whether it's within the church or it's off in Russia or Kenya or, I'm happy that we have a very diverse congregation. Theological issues, political issues, we run the spectrum from one end to the other. Age-wise, there was a time when it was all pretty young, and now, there was a time when it was getting pretty old. And now we've got a lot of young people,
Yes.
And young families, and I think that's really good.
Yeah. Well, the Methodist Church is struggling with lesbian and gay issues. Do you have thoughts about that?
I think they just need to get on with it. And God created all of us, and God called us good. It's just, I think when we get around to the people of my generation, your generation, and you're younger than I am probably, and get them out of the way, I think these young people, it's not a big deal.
I agree.
At all. I'm sure they look at the rest of us and say, what is the matter with you? What difference does it make? If they love somebody, let them love somebody. Who cares? It never was going to affect my marriage, or your marriage, or whatever. And unfortunately, we're going to have a split, but so many other denominations have already been through it and have gone that route, and I don't think it's going to cause any more decline in people that go to church than any other issues have over the many years.
I agree. Well, what would you like to see Hope accomplish over the next 38 years?
I hope it stays at that corner. That's where my ashes are going to be. I don't know what will happen if that church
I think
isn't
we're pretty
there.
well embedded in that corner.
I think we are too. Oh, that was another project that I was on with that first Memorial Garden Committee. And trying to get all of that approved through Greenwood Village was just not an easy task. Well, I just hope we keep reaching out to the community, and I like all the parts that they talk about now about being the church, that it's more than coming on Sunday morning, and I hope that that will continue.
We've talked about a lot of your memories and people and activities at the church. Do you have other special memories we haven't mentioned?
Oh, one of the things I thought about the other day was when we started, and that was maybe Marilyn and Al Lesser started that Tables of Eight, when we got together with others from the congregation, and we were just assigned groups, and we did a couple different ones, and then we got into one with Dick and Peggy Mills, Fred and Marge Matthews, and Judy and Dwight Zwick, and Don and I. And at the end of meeting at each other's houses, whether that took 4 months, once at each place, or
Right.
however many months it took, we all had such a good time that we stayed together and continued to stay together for years. We traveled together. Dick and Peggy had a condo up in Frisco. We all went up there. We went to a bed and breakfast together. We played golf together, you know. So that was a real special bonding group.
It's been a good relationship for a lot of people, I think.
And now, out of that group, not too many of us.
Yes, we're starting to lose more and more of them,
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
Do you have other thoughts or memories that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so.
Well, Julie, I want to thank you for all your service to Hope Church over there. It's made a difference to many of us in our lives in relation to that church, and certainly your faithful worshiping and service there has been appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks for sitting for this interview.
You're most welcome. My pleasure.